Hello and welcome to another edition of Critical Q&A, the show where I answer your questions based on what you've left for me in the comments section of my Q&A videos or have sent to me by email at askchrisshelton@gmail.com. Questions that have been coming in have really been great, and I think we got some good ones this week. I wanted to just briefly note it was really fun doing a movie review lately and seeing some of the really positive responses to it, so thank you. And I guess I will post more movie reviews coming up. Certainly no shortage of good movies coming out, or what I hope are going to be good movies. And I'll do my best to get those out. Those will pretty much come up at random. I don't know that I'm going to have a regularly scheduled weekly movie review sort of thing. I'm already doing 3 videos a week, and between my podcast and my channel, and people already tell me that's too much. And oh my God, Chris, I can't keep up with all the stuff you put out and all that. And it's kind of an interesting life I lead where I'm sort of led by the nose by my channel's schedule and that sort of thing. But hey, one thing I did want to let everybody know about, just to pile more fun on top of my life, is yesterday I started writing my second book. And I've talked about this before. That's going to be about the human rights violations and the RPF. And my own experience with Scientology's rehabilitation project Force. Doing a lot of research now to start this ball rolling. Reading up on Robert Lifton's book on thought reform, and I've got a whole lineup of things, and I've been contacting people and getting some straight dope on the early days of the RPF and this sort of thing. So I think this is going to be a pretty unique book in terms of the Scientology experience and data about it. There have been a lot of academics and people who have posted things about the RPF, and they've gotten it right and they've gotten it wrong in terms of certain aspects and parts of it. Because if you haven't been in Scientology and the Sea organization, then there's kind of a miss that happens in totally really understanding what it's about. Sometimes. It's really hard to kind of grok the whole thing. And so I think this book will help with that from the point of view of somebody who actually was in the Sea Org and did do the whole program and did complete it, and what that program's really all about, and the thought reform and whatnot. So anyway, that's started now. And also, for those of you who have been very patient with me because of my promises for months now about this e-meter video, it is coming. It is drafted, and I will be putting it together. And quite honestly, one of the reasons it's taken a while is it's not just going to be a video of me sitting here talking to you about the meter. I actually want to do some meter demonstrations and things to show how it's used in Scientology. And there's a little bit more logistics involved in that than just me sitting talking to the camera. And that's been a big problem for me in figuring out how to do it. So anyway, I really appreciate your patience with my promises on that. Keep holding out, and it will be coming. So now, let's get on with your questions for this week. Matsky, have you ever thought the irony that several years after you escaped from what Tori Magoo calls the Scientology Truman Show, you cast yourself in your own Truman Show? What I mean is, I've been watching all your videos since you started, and at times I almost think I know you, even though we've never met. You've told your whole life story in pieces. Sometimes you're consciously doing it in big chunks, sometimes in little snippets you've included in other conversations. You've let the whole world, or at least the whole internet, eavesdrop on conversations with your mom, your therapist friend, your pal Ruth, that Jehovah's Witness guy with the awesome voice. Have you ever stopped and thought about how much of yourself you've put out there? Any good or bad experiences at book signings, speeches, appearances with people who know you online but hadn't really met you before? Ever worry that OSA is taking notes to use your info against you? Do you think it's a habit left over from auditing, where you had to tell someone everything about you all the time? Then again, oversharing has been discussed since before the MySpace days. Okay, well, I first came out of Scientology, in 2012, and And 2013 was a very difficult year, as I've covered at length. And the concept, the idea of oversharing was a problem. That was something that I actually did grapple with as a Scientologist, and then as an ex-Scientologist. There was always this tendency to talk, and I've always talked a lot. I mean, going back to grade school, way before Scientology. I mean, I literally have report cards from with notes from my first grade teacher and second grade teacher. Yeah, Chris is really great, you know, but boy, he really has a problem controlling his mouth. You know, he really goes on and on and on. And I used to really struggle with the concept that I was supposed to sit there quietly in the classroom and not talk. I didn't understand that. And I guess it came down to, I laughed and laughed when I saw Fast Times at Ridgemont High and Sean Penn, you know, as Spicoli is sitting there telling the teacher, look, man, you know, you're here, I'm here, you know, doesn't that make this our time, right? Like not just my time, right? The teacher was always saying. And that was basically how I felt, you know, from the very beginning, as I was always, you know, yapping. And of course, Scientology then puts in this this very, you know, authoritarian system where, you know, you have to report on each other, and there's knowledge reports, and you're going in sessions, and of course, I got lots and lots of sec checking, you know, doing the RPF and other things. So I became very used to not having any privacy, not having any part of my life that wasn't totally known about. And of course, there's a lot of thought policing in Scientology. So I was constantly, you know, saying things that were on my mind to the sec checkers or the ethics officers or whatever. So that was a habit that I had to be broken of, for sure. Because you go out in the real world after you come out of Scientology, and other people don't necessarily want to hear it all, right? Or you're making other people uncomfortable, because I was willing to say things and talk about things that other people were not willing to talk about or share or hear about. And so I found, I'm not stupid, so I was watching the reactions of people when I would say certain things, and I'd learn to curb, my enthusiasm for sharing. Maybe what was on my mind, or what my feelings were about something, or my opinions about something. Now, there is a subset of the internet, of YouTube, and of our culture that is very interested in the lives of specific people, like the Kardashians. As an extreme example, probably the worst example, because I think they're the most uninteresting people I've ever had anything to do with. I literally turned on their show the other day, and I couldn't make it past about a minute or two before I just could not deal with watching them anymore. I find them extremely boorish and uninteresting. But some people are just fascinated by them and love them, obviously, because they've made their whole life revolve around being followed with cameras and literally Truman showing their life. I don't think I'm doing that. And let me explain. I started this YouTube channel to protest Scientology and to talk about critical thinking, and and that's, gone on for a while now, where I've talked about lots and lots of different things with Scientology. And of course, all of that comes from my own experiences with it. I don't claim to have had the universal Scientology experience. Other people have had better experiences with Scientology than I did. They didn't get as deeply involved in it either. I mean, I don't think, I think I have a pretty good idea of what it's all about from having gone all the way up into the Sea Organization. Anyway, I made after learning to curb my oversharingness, I started this YouTube channel, and I started talking about things. And my first videos that came out had me in a black shirt on a white background, and that was calculatedly done. I mean, it was easy to do, so there was that reason to do it. But also it was done because I was making myself the least important part of what I was talking about. I didn't want to talk about myself. I didn't want to talk about my own experiences and make my channel a big memoir. I wanted to talk about Scientology from a maybe slightly dispassionate, more objective, more critical sort of view, because I thought that would be the thing that would be effective in communicating the abuses of it and the problems with it, rather than just talking about my problems with it. I didn't want to talk about my problems with Scientology. I wanted to talk about the bigger issues and problems with Scientology, and I think I did that. I think I successfully achieved that. But as time went on, the feedback I started getting from people were asking me a lot about myself and my own experiences and my own feelings and opinions about Scientology, and then about other things. And that started taking the channel in a new direction a little bit, a more regular direction. This is when I decided to start putting out content more regularly. And I started this Q&A show because people were asking me questions about Scientology that I hadn't particularly addressed, but they were also asking me personal questions about my own experiences. I wrote my book, and the first chapter of my book is about me and my experience with Scientology. But even then, I really only wrote that chapter to establish my bona fides, my credentials as an ex-Scientologist and Sea Org member, so that people would know when they read my book that I was somebody who lived it and knew what I was talking about. And that was why that chapter was there. It wasn't there to highlight, or talk about me and my greatness or my life or something. Now, there came a point about 6 months ago where, I'd answered a lot of questions about Scientology, a lot of information out there, and a commenter made a point to me about my own personal information and about me, and they wanted to know more about me, and it kind of hit me that I had to make a decision at that point as to how much more I wanted to share about myself and my experiences. And I've always been a pretty open book. That was strategically decided, like on my social media, on my Facebook and whatnot. I just sort of put out there what I'm doing, because I realize it's a futile effort to try to play a game with OSA or with Scientology of, I'm going to hide this and they won't find out about it, because that's, of course, the exact thing they're going to want to find out about and expose and talk about, because they're going to think it's a weakness, or they're going to get an edge on you because they're going to expose some part of your life that you don't want exposed. So I've always tried to be an open book. But as far as putting myself out here on my channel more personally, I decided, in response to this commenter and some other questions and whatnot that I'd gotten, that I would start going way more personal, and I'd start talking really deeply about my own feelings and attitudes about things. And I think this also started around the time that I started doing, or had gotten into doing, my podcast with Ruth. I decided I'd just open up more about, me and my own views and opinions and attitudes, and maybe people would find this interesting. And I was kind of hoping that they would, because I like what I'm doing and I want to continue doing it, through this channel. So that's when that kind of decision was made on my part to just open up fully, and not really have lots and lots of secrets. Now, I was recently, last week or 2 weeks ago, I was at HowdyCon, which was an event put on around Tony Ortega's Underground Bunker blog. And people from that blog who comment there regularly went to this real-life event and met for the first time in many cases. And I went there because I thought I was kind of asked to go there, and I thought it would be kind of fun. And I met a lot of people that I've never seen, heard, addressed before, not Facebook friends, just people who, appreciated my work and whatnot. And a lot of them, more than one, came up to me and said, first thing out of their mouth, "I feel like I know you." And of course I don't know them, but they felt that way. And it occurred to me, I was comfortable with that, because I thought, well, I put myself out here. I'm not an actor, I'm not playing a role when I'm on camera. This is me. And I thought, well, I guess they do kind of know me, and then I had to get to know them. And it was kind of an interesting and weird feeling. It was weird. I guess I thought maybe this is what celebrities feel like sometimes or something, and I don't really think of myself that way. So, that was kind of interesting. But at the same time, I'll just end. I know I'm kind of rambling on and on this question, so let me just end with this. There's a lot that I don't say, and there's a lot about me that I have never put out there. Some of my relationships, some of my friendships that I have, that sort of thing are not, in the public eye at all. And I don't know that they ever or will be, or, to the degree that I've shared some other things about myself. I do keep things back. And I think it'll always kind of be that way. There'll be some judgment because I'm not doing what I do in order to aggrandize me. That's not what this channel's for. I'm doing this channel, I'm doing this work because I want to help people, because I want to help educate to whatever degree that I can, and because I want to also educate or help by showing people my own journey out of Scientology and into the real world, and the process of recovery and the catharsis of that. That's why I went and did that video with my mom. I mean, I know that was the most personal thing I've done, and that was definitely, showing a lot to the world. But I did that for a reason, because I wanted to help people who are in the same boat that I was in. And I wanted to help Scientologists, active right now, Scientologists, who are not wanting to be disconnected from their kids or disconnected from their parents. And so I made a decision that my personal story with my mom would be the way to help them with that. So that's why I did that. And I didn't, really think of it as any other reason than doing that, right? It's not. So in a way, I guess, if it makes sense to you, or if it can, it's not about me. And yet, in order to get across the ideas and education or help or stories or whatever, I have to talk about me. I mean, I guess in the end, it is what I know more about than anything else. And I've lived a pretty unique life in a number of ways. And so I think that my efforts are to accomplish those purposes of my channel. And now I'm doing that by talking about myself, as well as talking objectively and critically about things too. And I hope the mix is working, and I hope it continues to work. And I hope that I'm getting across to you that I don't feel like I'm doing a Truman Show here. That's not part of what I am trying to do. And I don't think I'm ever gonna try to do that. The day you are following me around in my apartment with a camera, to the grocery store, or the park or something, please shoot me. I don't want that reality show, sort of thing. I just want to do what I have set out to do here, and I hope that I'm doing it. So there you go. Chip Northup. I assumed Scientologists were at their roots atheistic, with no deity as an eternal first causer type being. What is the Church's stance or teachings on a supreme being? Is it a don't ask, don't tell, what your God view is, or is there a codified teaching? As mentioned, I thought the roots were atheistic, but I saw on Oprah her asking Tom Cruise if he believed in God, and he boldly said, yes, of course I do. I guess the second part of the question would be, what did Tom mean when he said he believes in God? Was that a fair game thing where you can say anything for the sake of PR? Scientologists are not atheists. And Hubbard talks about the concept of God or an eternal figure or a big being and this sort of thing. He poo-poos the Christian God quite heavily, and there's definitely no doubt that you are not expected as a Scientologist to believe in some, white-haired, bearded guy on a throne sitting up in heaven who's going to promise you eternal salvation through accepting Jesus Christ as your personal savior or something. That's none of that. All of that is definitely not Scientology, and you will be disabused of those ideas as a Scientologist if you go in there and listen to Hubbard's lectures and whatnot. But the idea of a supreme being or a prime mover unmoved or an initial creator is still very much a potential reality for Scientologists. No, it's not addressed in Scientology where we came from as spiritual beings. It's acknowledged, or it's part of the dogma of Scientology that we are spiritual beings, and that we are not, our flesh, right? And that we will live over and over and over again by, taking on new and new bodies. But at some point in the past, maybe a near infinite amount of time in the past, there must have been a point where there were no thetans, where there were no spiritual entities, and they came from somewhere. Whether that was coming from the, brain or id of some, deity figure, or whether it was some, bigger thetan splitting into all kinds of little parts or something. I mean, we used to have kind of conversations about this stuff when I first got into Scientology, and you're getting all into the philosophy of it, and you have these, heady conversations amongst yourselves, amongst Scientologists, about this stuff. But Hubbard never addresses it anywhere, at least nowhere that I've seen, and I've looked for it. And so it's kind of just a big question mark. And the only thing Hubbard ever said definitive about it is, you will come to understand the God dynamic, or the infinity, or God. You will come to understand that once you have attained spiritual awareness on the path all the way up to the God level. In other words, without getting all technical, there are these, life is split up into 8 parts in Scientology, from you to family to groups to mankind, life forms, the physical universe, spirits, and then God. So you can see it's a concentric circle outward from yourself all the way to infinity. And Hubbard said that once you've achieved awareness on those first 7 of what he called the dynamics, you will then, and only then, be able to achieve awareness of and true understanding of the 8th dynamic, which is the biggest, write-off, no answer that he could have given on the subject, because I don't think he wanted to really make up any answers about that for whatever reason. And so he just sort of brushed it off and said, yeah, you'll get there when you get there. And that's Scientologists' view on God. Ah, indeed. Hi, Chris. Did you know any Scientologists that listen to rap music? What is Scientology's view on rap in general? I knew lots of Scientologists who listened to rap music, mostly young Scientologists. It's a cultural thing, and an age thing. And when people in Scientology are allowed to like any kind of music they want. There aren't any real restrictions on or efforts to censor music particularly, except this, and I think you'll find this interesting. There was a Sea Org recruiter, Brandon Faust, who had as part of his recruit gig, as part of his pattern speech of getting people recruited for the Sea Organization, he said that the psychiatry had infiltrated the music industry, because psychiatry is the big bad guys in Scientology, right? So everything bad that happens in the world is because of psychiatry and psychiatrists and psychologists. So he said that they had purposefully infiltrated the music industry to degrade it and put out music like rap music or hip-hop or a lot of pop music. He said it was purposefully infiltrated so that so as to create sexual liberties and free love and this sort of thing, this attitude of just have sex with anybody anytime, it doesn't matter and it's all good. That whole culture was purposefully created, right? And this was part of his grand conspiracy theory he would use to recruit people. And rap music was part of that conspiracy. Now that was just that one guy. That's not official Scientology, okay? There are no official Scientology statements on rap music, and Hubbard was dead by the time rap music was really starting to come out and flourish. And I never heard any comments from Hubbard about rap one way or the other. So that's what I can say about that. Marcus G. As I have been watching your YouTube videos and keep thinking that there has been many things that are helpful in Scientology, such as concourse, word clearing, and conditions in life. I have not come across this knowledge anywhere else. You briefly go over the idea that people ask you this question. Chapter 8, is there anything good in Scientology? But you are rather vague explaining what your thoughts are about it. Of course, I agree with you about the fact that there are a lot of contradictions and lies being told every day. However, what are your real thoughts on the helpful and useful things that seem to be really unique about this body of knowledge? Okay, first off, I think that you need to know that just because you haven't come across something similar to what you've seen in Scientology about the concourse or conditions or word clearing doesn't mean that it's not out there. Hubbard plagiarized and copied a lot of things, and word clearing, for example, was not even his idea. It was something that was given to him by a couple of Scientologists who were teachers, who developed that in their teaching methodologies, and then gave it to Hubbard and said, hey, this is a really good thing for study. And then Hubbard grabbed it up and said, ha, look at what I came up with, and proceeded to do lectures on the importance of looking up words in dictionaries. And that's where that came from. So so just because you haven't seen word clearing anywhere else, well, you will certainly find stress on dictionaries and looking up words in lots and lots of educational materials if you look. And as far as the concourse goes, it's the same thing. Hubbard didn't develop the TRs, the training routines. As far as, if I recall correctly, his son did, and some other Scientologists around the early to mid-1950s. And then he released them and called them his little, jewels of genius, and had formalized these drills on communication. But those drills are more harmful than they are helpful. I mean, sitting staring at somebody for 2 hours at a time, that's not a helpful thing to do. That induces a trance state, and it is psychologically damaging. So I don't think that was a very constructive thing to do. Now, learning how to talk to other people, learning how to look somebody in the eye, learning how to get across a communication to somebody, that is in like countless numbers of communication seminars and business seminars that you'll find, again, all across the United States and all across the world. So these are not rabidly unique ideas. You also mentioned the conditions formulas. I don't know where he got those from. Maybe those were original with him. I have read recently somewhere somebody saying that there was an earlier practice that sounded or looked very similar to the conditions, right? But I'm not saying Hubbard didn't come up with anything on his own. And in fact, in my book, I said that there are things that he did come up with on his own. For example, the Scientology justice system and suppressive persons, and disconnection and this sort of thing. These are in the tradition of earlier religious practices and whatnot, like the disconnection. But still, I was being a little tongue-in-cheek there because I was, sort of poking fun at Hubbard, coming up with only the bad stuff, Here's the thing. I think, and if you want me to be like totally real about my ideas about the helpfulness of Scientology, I don't think this is a vague statement, but I'll say it. What I've said before. I think that the good things that are in Scientology can be gotten elsewhere without all of the authoritarian trappings and control factors that are built into the DNA of Scientology. I don't think that trade-off or balance is at all a worthwhile balance or trade-off. And so my advice to anybody about Scientology is stay the hell away from it. It's not a good thing. And there might be good things in it, but those good things that are in it can be gotten elsewhere without all the nonsense. And I don't think that's a vague statement. And I have said this before, but I hope that communicates exactly how I feel about it and my best possible advice on the subject. Hubbard was a pseudoscientist, plagiarist, and authoritarian narcissist. And he set up a control system, and he used religious cloaking in order to hide what he was doing and give himself tax exemption and First Amendment privileges so that he could control people's lives. And he wanted to control people's lives so that he could help them as he saw help to be. But I'd like to point out that the Chinese communists who brainwashed people in the 1950s thought they were helping them too. They really thought that brainwashing was good stuff and that they were actually helping them to see the benefits of communism and to see the error of their ways in their, Western imperialist ideas. That to them was help. And Hubbard's ideas were to him helpful. And so people who knew Hubbard and worked with Hubbard, tell stories about how, beneficent he was and how genuine he was in wanting to help people. But that doesn't mean that what he was doing was actually helpful. It wasn't. And Scientology does not lead you to a good place. It leads you to a bad place. So that's what I can say about it. And I hope that's clear. Tilly MB. When LRH was in his stateroom doing research, what in hell was he doing all that time? There was no internet, so he could not even do what passes for research in many circles today. He seems to have been alone a lot of the time. Why would people think he could do research in a room all by himself? Okay, well, before the internet, there's these things called libraries and books, and you might have heard of them. And people actually did research before the internet, believe it or not, by reading books. Okay, and I'll stop being a smartass. Hubbard did read books, I'm sure, when he was in his stateroom all by himself. But you actually bring a very, very, very good point. And I actually laughed when I read your question for the first time because it's a great point. He sat in a room on the Apollo, on his ship, and he twiddled around with an e-meter, and he held these cans, and he mentally jerked off for hours on end, is what he did. And he thinks he came up with all these amazing discoveries from his own recollections from the distant past, right? And he somehow thought that he was, mentally or spiritually working his way through the traps and implants and horrible things that Scientology claims has been done to spiritual beings in the past. And he was working his way through the labyrinth of all these mental traps and whatnot, and spiritual traps that were holding all of us back and holding us all down, because he thought that he was somehow special and above all of those things, and he was being a pathfinder for the rest of us. So that's what he was doing in that room. Was he really doing that? No, I don't think so. But that's what he told himself he was doing. That's what he thought he was doing, and that's what he wrote. And so that's where his discoveries would come from, his discoveries, okay? So, yeah, so that's kind of what he was doing in that room all by himself for hours on end. Hey, it's Flash Answers time. Cassie W. Does David Miscavige profit from the real estate transactions of the newly purchased ideal orgs in any way? What if they are later sold? Does he profit then? Does he take a commission or any other form of payment? I'm quite sure that David Miscavige does not personally profit from the money collected from the ideal orgs directly, nor does he get commissions on them, because that would be enormous, and that would be very obvious enormous. In other words, personal gain from Scientology, which the IRS could bust him for just like that. So no, I don't think it's that direct. His benefits from Scientology financially are more indirect. He gets money from the church anytime he wants for whatever he wants, but it's not that direct of a line where, say, a bunch of fundraising's been done here, and that money comes in, and he gets a percentage off the top. It's much more convoluted than that in order to protect him from any obvious enormous issues which would threaten the church's tax exemption. VU. I am fascinated with the responses you give to these questions. Does Scientology still harass you, and do you have any concerns that Scientology will come after you because you have this YouTube presence with thousands of viewers? Why do you think those of us who have not been in Scientology or are not actually cult victims find this information so interesting? At this point, I am not concerned about Scientology coming after me. They've got much bigger fish to fry all over the world. For example, the recent situation in Russia, which actually isn't recent, it's been going for quite a while. I mean, they're on the verge of getting kicked out of that country entirely. And that's a big, huge problem for them. Way bigger than my channel. I thought at first, when I first started speaking out, that this might be an issue for me, that I might be gone after. And, you know, any day now, that could happen. But my fear of it is not really what it once was. And at this point, I don't think they're going to do that. As far as why I think you guys are so interested in this stuff, I'm not really sure. But thank you. I'm glad you are. And I've actually thought of a few ideas about that, but without getting into some deep psychoanalysis about, you know, a whole body of people that I've never met, all I can say is that people find the subject fascinating. I think that there's some rednecking going on, or sorry, rubbernecking going on with it, that people are just fascinated by the train wreck that is Scientology. I think other people are fascinated by the thought reform and thought control mechanisms and methods that are used, or you know, destructive cult activities, and I think that's some of the reasons why people watch. Your Heavenly Father, Crizzle Shell Dizzle, as you are being my mainest of all nizzles, want to give mad props. We gots to blast dem Cylon fools with knowledge. I wish I could call up Elron to ax him, you mad bro? What question would you ask him if he came back? I think if I could get an honest answer out of L. Ron Hubbard about anything, which I think would be, you know, not just what I could ask him, but, you know, would he answer it truthfully? It would be whether he, you know, at what point did he go from scam to true believer in the subject? I have my own guesses about it. I've talked about it. But I wonder, for him, when did he really, truly believe fully in Scientology and Dianetics? Or, you know, was it from the beginning? Or was it a process as he went along? Because I know he died a true believer. But I don't know if he went into Scientology and into Dianetics truly believing in that stuff fully. Or if he always kind of knew he was scamming people, and then gradually he just kind of went mentally down the tank and ended up, you know, falling for his own nonsense. I think I've pinpointed an answer to that. I've talked about it. But if I could ask him a question and get an honest answer out of him, I think I would ask him that. Okay, and so we've come to the end of another show. I hope you found these answers interesting. And if you have any questions, any feedback, any comments at all, leave them in the comment section below. I see and read all of them, respond to some of them sometimes. And always happy to answer your questions, and I hope that they continue coming in. So I will see you guys next week, and thanks for coming around.